I'm Lynn Pearson. In a moment, I'd like to tell you why I decided to stand by and, in fact, nurse my former husband during his fight against AIDS.
Gloria, sometimes the pain of the AIDS victim is intensified incredibly because of parents and friends who abandon them for a number of reasons. And it's something we can't ignore. We've discussed it quite a bit here on the program. Lynn Pearson chose to stand by as her ex-husband, Gerald, slowly lost the battle against this devastating disease, and she explains her decision in the new book, Goodbye, I Love You, the true story of a wife, her homosexual husband, and a love honored for all time and all eternity. I must say, Carol, I'd always thought that How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying was the longest title I'd ever read. But you cover it all in the title. The decision to write the book, were you keeping a journal all the way through this?
Actually, I did keep a diary for many, many years. That was extremely helpful to me, and I recommend it. I did not make the decision to write the book as a book until after the experience was completed. Mm-hmm. It was really a few days after Gerald passed away that it first occurred to me, because I continued to see so much suffering, so many young men dying disowned by their families, so many families having to meet not only the tragedy of the disease, but just the phenomenon of having in the family a homosexual person, and very often not having much good information, good support on how to deal with that. And I knew that I was in a position, if I chose to, that I could help. And so I decided to do
Carol,
that.
how long had you known Gerald when you married him, and how long were you married?
We knew each other for about a year before we married, during which time he explained to me before the marriage that he had had a homosexual experience in his background, but that was over as far as he was concerned. He wanted a conventional life and tried very hard to make that adjustment, and was baffled when he found that he still felt the same way. We finally were married for 12 years, a very good marriage, really, in so many ways, had 4 wonderful children. And then we made the decision that we must end the marriage and try to maintain a good, friendly relationship, which I'm grateful that we were able to do.
It must have been very hard for you, because as a woman and a wife, having certain expectations about your womanliness, being related to your husband's supposed manliness, etc., etc. How did you deal with that?
Well, it was, of course, an incredibly devastating situation. Many women have faced something like this, and you either get up in the morning and go on, or you don't. And I did, and I had a number of wonderful people in my life to give me enough love that I was able to work through that. And one of the reasons that I have written this book is to encourage, certainly, families and friends to continue to love those people in their lives who do have this condition, but also to speak to these very many women who are wives today and former wives of homosexual men, to acknowledge with them that we are not alone, and that to tell them it wasn't their fault, really, if they did not turn out to be the cure for their homosexual husband.
Yeah, I think that's an important point for women to know.
There was another dimension to this, and that is that you and Gerald were both Mormons, and the Mormonism has very strict tenets about homosexuality. Was that of concern at any point? Did you feel yourself being pulled from both sides? Was your love so great that you believed you could overcome it?
Well, indeed, the church's stand was one that caused a great deal of turmoil for Gerald, and certainly intensified the emotional situation for me. But on the other side of that same coin was the fact that the church, and all the best that I have received from my religion, is that we love one another, and that we try as best we can to understand that all of us here are children of God, dealing with individual, different, difficult circumstances, and that we look around and say, now, what would Christ do if he were here? And then to try to do that.
Let's talk about the diagnosis of AIDS and how you found out about it, and what your reaction and Gerald's was, and the children's.
Yes. It was about 5 years after the marriage had ended, during which period Gerald and I had continued to talk very openly about what he was learning, his hopes, his disappointments, and during which time he had continued a good, unbroken, loving relationship with the children, which, of course, is what I wanted. Mm-hmm. And then in March of 1984, when he was diagnosed with the disease, that was, of course, extremely difficult for all of us. But the children and I lent our best energy, our best support to the energy that Gerald was mobilizing for himself. We continue to keep him in our family prayers, etc., and to do all that we could for him.
Now, was the church aware of Gerald's homosexuality? And once the diagnosis was made and you did bring him back into the house to care for him, were they aware of it? Or was it something you chose to keep
that was
quiet
not that was not general knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
There were many people in my life who did know that, but not generally.
Were you taking a chance?
I knew those good people and that they would want to help me in what I was doing there. And I was so happy to receive from them all of the support and the love and the ongoing relationship that I had hoped for.
I think in the book you point out that you were overwhelmed by their response.
Well, I was indeed. I was, and I'm glad to bring this up because we need some good models for all the religious congregations and the non-religious groups who are right now and will be in escalating numbers facing this crisis. And I believe we have to, all of us, know that we're in this thing together as members of the human family, and certainly in this extremity that we need to treat one another as we would like to be treated ourselves.
Well, you describe things that I don't think ordinary people can imagine going through, but I suppose when it must be like in wartime, you don't know what reserves you have until you're asked and called upon. And you showed a lot of courage in the book in caring for him, because this did go on for some time. And the children are well today? They're all right?
Oh, they are indeed. They're very bright and resilient and full of life, and I'm grateful for that.
If you had something to say to the public at large, and more women are indeed living with men who are either bisexual or coming out of the closet, who are...
Oh, certainly
not. What would you say?
Well, what you just brought up is just extremely important, and I want very much to appeal to the homosexual men who are married, and there are very many of them, who went into it, I think, with the best of intentions. But they must, at this time, make some conscionable decisions, because there are women now, and I've talked to one, she has the AIDS virus from her homosexual husband, and while I know the dilemma that these men are in, they must protect those people who that they're responsible to.
Thank you very much, Carol, for being with us. It's a remarkable book, and I wish you well with it. We'll be right back.
Married for 32 years.